right, folks, it's always Florida. A 64-year-old black man was released from prison after 32 years. Now, an appeals court ruled his initial murder conviction could stand. Crosley Green was released from prison last year, and last month he learned that a federal appeals panel reinstated his vacated 1990 murder conviction. Confusing. Well, imagine if you're the one who was fighting for your life and trying to stay out of prison. Crosley Green and attorney Keith Harrison, a partner at Crowell and Mooring, join us from Titusville, Florida. Glad to have you both here. So, okay, I'm just trying to understand here. So walk us through, Crosley, how we got to this point. You were convicted of a murder. What happened there? Give us the history.
So I'll take that question in terms of, what happened here. What happened here was this is a case of a classic racial hoax where two young teenagers are out parking in an orange grove. There's a shooting, and a young lady says a black guy did it. And they picked Mr. Green's photograph out of a lineup, and he was convicted by an all-white jury. So it's a classic case of a racial hoax. But in this case, the two police officers that first got to the scene and found the young man bleeding, but he wasn't dead yet. He ended up bleeding to death. But found him, and they looked around. Based on their crime scene observation, they knew there was no black guy. But more importantly, they told all the investigators and the prosecutor that the girl did it. And they laid out the evidence that they saw indicating that Mr. Green was innocent and that they had the wrong man. And the prosecutor withheld this information, these notes, from the defense. It should have been turned over, because it was evidence of innocence. It wasn't turned over, and in part as a result of that, Mr. Green was wrongfully convicted. A federal court ruled that he was wrongfully convicted, and then, as you indicated, the 11th Circuit has now reversed that decision and reinstated his conviction. So we're appealing to the entire.
So what was the basis? So Keith, walk me through here. So what was the basis of the court overturning his conviction, and what did the appeals court say in reinstating the conviction?
Well, the basis of overturning his conviction was that the district court found that this evidence of innocence, in fact, the district court said it could not imagine more material evidence than that the first police responders on the scene thought there was evidence pointing to someone else as the perpetrator, and that went to the very heart of the defense case here, which was, there was no black guy. And so that's what the district court ruled. The Court of Appeals, the three-judge panel of the Court of Appeals, basically ruled that those prosecutor notes identifying those two white police officers as defense witnesses didn't matter, that it was immaterial, that turning those notes over to the prosecution wouldn't have had any impact on the trial. And that's what the panel, the three-judge panel of the 11th Circuit held.
Crosley, take us through what you are feeling, what you are dealing with, this up and down. You spend 32 years in prison. You went in, and how old were you?
31. I was 31 years old, and my first 3 years was rough. But I have to say it changed a great deal when I took to the Bible, took to reading it. I mean, strongly reading the Bible. and as though not only reading about it, but believing truly there is a higher being. And with that, my faith grew as far as to which way I should go. Should I stay angry, hateful, all above the things that a person feel when something like that happen. But with the good grace of the Lord, my life changed, and since then, there's no hatred. I've done 30 years after the first 3 with no blemish record of any kind of any wrongdoing, whether inmate or against another officer. My faith in what I believe and how I thought and continue to think and how it's going to turn out is far-fetched than anyone really can even imagine. All right. Right now, I'm feeling good. Whether or not the ruling was the way the ruling came, yet still I have my faith that it's going to go accordingly. And not only that, I have a family of sisters and brothers, sons, grandkids, nieces, nephew, and they all love me. With that ruling, which that you were describing or you mentioned about, that doesn't faze me because I'm not looking backwards. I'm just only looking forward to what to come. And there's better things to come and more. When I say better things, more better of a life for me than I had those years when I was there. For now, I've been asked that question many times, and I can only say that I have my hopes, I have my faith, I have my family, friends, and things are looking good for me. I have a job. I go to church every Sunday. I mean, it's unbelievable in the way I'm carrying on in the sense of anyone other than myself can probably feel the things I feel.
We've seen so many other cases like this around the country involving African Americans, mainly black men. Keith, what is the district attorney's office saying? Are they standing by this, saying absolutely send your client back to prison?
Yes, that's their view. They already filed a motion to have him sent back to prison, and we were able to defeat that motion. But Roland, you're absolutely right. This is a classic case of, a black man being wrongly convicted. We took on this case pro bono for free because that's what justice requires. We have a really strong pro bono program. Julius Jones is another one of my firm's pro bono clients, and just another example of, from our perspective, what is fundamentally racial injustice. The criminal justice system not working the way the Constitution requires.
It is. It's amazing to me when we keep seeing these things happen. In the trial, was there any physical evidence, any DNA evidence that linked your client, or was this solely based upon an eyewitness?
There was no physical evidence at trial linking Mr. Green to the crime scene or anything else. Not one single fingerprint. Supposedly, he kidnapped these 2 teenagers and drove a truck several miles, didn't have gloves on, and there wasn't a single fingerprint. There is no physical evidence, tying him to the crime scene. In fact, Long after the fact, we were able to do an investigation, and we found 10 eyewitnesses that put him miles away from the crime scene at the time the crime was being committed. But there was no evidence at trial, no physical evidence connecting him to this case, to this this terrible crime.
So just one woman who says, I saw a black man, and they ascertain it was Mr. Green.
Yes. And the amazing thing is, her initial description didn't even fit Mr. Green. Her initial description was of a black man who was muscular and thickly built, not quite like a weightlifter. These are her words. Crosley Green at that age of 31 was skinny. And she also described a man with a jerry curl. Crosley Green had close cropped hair similar to what he's got now. So the description was not even close, but it was a black man. And that was basically all the evidence they had. And he was picked out of a photo lineup. And that photo lineup is one of the most suggestive photo lineups I've ever seen. As a former prosecutor, it was done in a way that you would never do it. A photo array. There were 6 pictures, and Mr. Green's photo was smaller, darker, and right in the middle of the top row. What the prosecutors refer to as the bullseye, because that's where your eye naturally goes in any photo array, to the one that's right in the middle. And that's where they put Mr. Green's picture. And then the police told the young teenager that the person that they believed committed the crime was in the photo array. And then when she picked out Crosley Green, they told her, yeah, you got the right guy. And that's the identification that sent him to death row.
Crosley, final question for you. You talked about the love of your family. Are they fearful that this is not going to go your way, and you may have to go back to prison?
That is a tough question for me to answer directly, because I don't want to say that they are and they ain't. I can only say that in my perspective, there's no fear with me, because like I said, I'm gonna always look forward. I'm gonna always look to be free. Hopefully that it will go my way. I pray, and only the good Lord gonna send it that way. But getting back to my family, yes, they have their feelings about this, and I see it on them, and I try to talk to them about this and stuff like that. And, I just try to help them to understand wherever the good Lord put forth. I mean, that's it.
Well, we thank both of you for joining us, Crosley Green as well as Attorney Keith Harrison. Thank you so very much.
Roland, thank you for covering this important story. Really appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
I appreciate it. Thank you very much. Let's pull in my panel. A. Scott Bolden, he is the former chair, National Bar Association Political Action Committee, attorney in Washington, D.C., Monique Presley, legal analyst and crisis manager, Dr. Jason Nichols, senior lecturer, African American Studies, Department of the University of Maryland, College Park. Scott, I'll start with you. When you hear these details in this case, no forensic evidence, nothing else tied to the crime, woman says black man, her initial explanation doesn't actually match him. That's a whole lot going on to still find somebody guilty.
It would certainly sound like it, but the reality is this story matches up with Jimmy Gardner's story in West Virginia. The description is wrong. There's no physical evidence, at least no reliable physical evidence. He doesn't fit the prescription, and ultimately, a federal judge, where Jimmy Gardner did not exhaust his state court habeas corpus proceedings because he sat in jail for 17 months. He filed a motion with the federal district court, and this judge, and that particular judge in West Virginia, took his case up. Here, you have a similar situation whereby the Federal Court of Appeals has struck down what the federal court did. In reality, or at least in large part, as I read the case, was because the issue of this evidence not being turned over, what we call Brady, the exculpatory material, had not the arguments had not been exhausted through the state court habeas corpus process. You got to go through the state habeas corpus process, but when you exhaust those remedies, then you get to go through the same process of the federal court. The federal court doesn't have jurisdiction unless you exhaust the state court habeas corpus piece. So I don't want to get too far into that, but the reality is, it's very unfortunate. This is an elderly gentleman. I know Keith, his lawyer. He was a prosecutor in Manhattan when I was, a very fine trial lawyer, criminal and civil. And so we ought to keep looking at this case to see what happens, because he's been out for 4 years. Remember that. Going back into prison at his age could be completely detrimental to his well-being.
Monique, as I said to Keith, we've seen just so many of these cases in the past, and it still just sort of boggles the mind when we hear about, and again, more than likely his brother spending 20 and 30 years in prison for crimes they say that they did not commit.
Yes, and the estimate per year is upward of 10,000 who are wrongly convicted. That's not all a jury getting it wrong. That's them being just cajoled, forced, manipulated into pleading guilty to things that they haven't been guilty of. That's others turning state's evidence on them and testifying falsely in order to get better sentences for themselves. Or then it's cases like this where an eyewitness, it appears, got it wrong. The difficulty is that there are no quick fixes there in that particular instance, because I don't think what people even on our side of the system are advocating is that if there is only eyewitness testimony and nothing else, that the eyewitness testimony be dismissed or discounted in favor of physical evidence or a lack thereof. I think that has its own set of problems, challenges, and difficulties, and that we do want a system in which if an eyewitness sees something happen, that eyewitness's testimony is credited. Maybe we need adjustments in the system that weigh the system. Maybe we are now so far advanced that there are very few crimes where there isn't any amount of physical evidence that can be gleaned because of the sophistication of our system now. But as for cases that are so far in years past, it's just one of those hard travesties, and that's what I believe we are facing here. And I pray that there's a resolution that enables him to not go and have to return back to the federal prison system.
And Jason, what just jumps out, I mean, this is a man who literally, he goes in at 31. Half of his life is gone. Gone. And then when you look at the average life expectancy of an African-American man, I mean, just gone.
Yeah, this, I think, honestly, is every black man's worst nightmare, to get caught up in the system. And, you are completely innocent, you don't match a description, and yet you get held accountable for something that you didn't do, and spend decades separated from your family, separated from your children are having children, and you're not there to be there, as I can hear my child screaming in the other room. It's literally a nightmare. And I have a lot of questions about this. I think the question that rises in my mind is there any investigation, private or otherwise, of this woman who made the claims initially? Has anybody looked at, anything that may have tied her to the crime? Have they looked for a weapon or anything like that that could potentially tie her to the crime? Where is she now? you know, and if he's able to get another trial, would it, you know, could they bring her in and you know, examine her, cross-examine her? I'm not a lawyer, but it seems like if the attorney, from what I read, the district attorney who initially withheld the evidence is saying that they got it wrong. These two police officers said they got it wrong, and we're pointing towards this woman. And I'm wondering where she is and if she can answer some questions.
Well, you know, when you hear people get it wrong, that's easy to say, but when you lose half of your life sitting in prison, that's a bitter, bitter pill to swallow. All right, folks, back to that Roland Unfiltered video in just one moment. Folks, Black Star Network is here.
Oh, no punches!
I'm real revolutionary right now.
Support this man, Black Media. He makes sure that our stories are told.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America, Roland.
Stay black. I love y'all.
All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, there's a difference between Black Star Network and Black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be Black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig?